Namibia is one of 4 black states which border South Africa. Namibia is different from the independent states of Botswana, Zimbabwe and Mozambique because it is occupied illegally by South Africa. In the face of international pressure, South Africa has recently changed its policy towards its black neighbors. The non-aggression pact with Mozambique and the indicated troop withdrawals from Angola further to the north seem to point towards a new initiative on the part of South Africa. But for us, the citizens of Namibia, the evidence of any real change is strangely absent. This program is about the South African occupation of our country. This is Windhoek, the capital of Namibia. From here, it could be a prosperous city anywhere in the Western world. Expensive suburban homes with large swimming pools set in landscaped gardens. As smart military bands play and soldiers drill, one gets the impression of a peaceful, orderly country where our friendly army is entertaining happy and secure citizens. It's a false impression. In truth, this is the facade that conceals a billion-pound war machine, an army of occupation made up of black and white South Africans and conscripted Namibians. It is a land where military games like this have a deadly purpose and where a war has been going on for nearly 20 years. My name is Nora Chase and I work as Director of Education with the Namibia Council of Churches. This year, Namibians are looking back over a century of one of the most inhuman and brutal colonialist periods in history. 100 years ago, German colonialists invaded my country, and when the people revolted against the theft of their land, the Germans retaliated by wiping out 40,000 of the 60,000 of our Herero people and over 11,000 of our 20,000 Namas, men, women and children. No wonder that 100 years later, our population is only just over 1 million. Germany lost the First World War and with it its colonies, but this did not mean the end of our suffering. South Africa took over and turned the sacred trust of the international community into the brutal mandate that my country has become. South Africa spends millions of pounds every year showing their version of what's happening in Namibia. But there is another reality. Repression and intimidation occurs daily. Public meetings are banned. Unemployment and infant mortality is high. Namibians seeking independence are detained without trial. Our relatives disappear without trace. Our sons are conscripted to kill their brothers on the northern border. This is the Namibia I want you to see. And here I want to talk for the many Namibians who would like to tell you more, but are afraid of their lives. Namibia is Africa's last colony, the only nation still to be totally occupied by a foreign power, South Africa. Namibia was never a part of South Africa. It has long had an independent identity. But after the First World War, it came under the protection of the League of Nations, and South Africa was given mandatory power over the country. This meant that it had the responsibility to guide and prepare Namibia for independence. Instead of carrying out this sacred trust, the South African regime has continued to govern Namibia, imposing its own policies and exploiting Namibia economically. In 1966, the United Nations terminated the mandate. South Africa ignored this decision. 5 years later, the International Court of Justice declared South Africa's presence in Namibia to be illegal. This decision was also ignored. Namibia has immense natural resources, the largest and purest supplies of uranium in the world, vast diamond deposits, copper and tin. South Africa and its Western allies are protecting the huge profits they are deriving from exploiting our mineral wealth over many years. This is one of the reasons South Africa has hung on with such determination to its illegal occupation of Namibia.
It is over 60 years since South Africa have occupied Namibia, and during those years and this period, the people of Namibia, namely the blacks, the majority of the people in this country, have no right in participating in the political process. They don't vote, and also they are subjected to the laws which have been made by people who are not democratically elected by them to represent them and make such laws.
From the air, Windhoek's Black Township doesn't look like a ghetto. But as in South Africa, the large majority of blacks have been forced to live in shanty towns on the outskirts of our cities. South Africa claims that apartheid in Namibia is dead. But ask any one of my fellow black Namibians if you want to know the truth. It affects every minute of our daily lives. Whether we have a job, what we have to eat, and even how long we can expect to live. You only have to look at our living conditions to see through their talk of equality. White Namibians are less than 1/10 of our population, but they own 2/3 of the land, including the best farming areas and all our vast mineral resources. The life expectation of a black Namibian is 50 years, that of whites, 70. Many blacks never live to collect their meager pensions, which anyway are only 1/4 of those given to whites.
The blacks here are dying because of diseases that are easily preventable, either by good food, good proper water, immunization of children and so on. But the funds that are available are being used to treat sophisticated Western type illnesses such as high blood pressure, rheumatism and so on. In other words, in the health services, apartheid manifests itself in this way. The blacks need a service which prevents illness, but the white administration runs a service which treats illnesses basically for the whites.
This is Katutura, the black township of Windhoek. Katutura is a Herero word meaning literally, we do not live. It's 6 o'clock in the morning and Katutura is waking up. Every household is geared to one thing: getting to the bus in time to reach the white areas in order to start a hard day's work for low wages, or to spend hours outside the labor offices waiting for the rare job opportunities. If one considers that for every 13 blacks in Namibia, there is only one white, then one cannot understand why thousands of blacks have to be crowded into this squalid location. But if you look under the surface of our society, you soon begin to understand. Katutura serves as a large reservoir for cheap black labor. The children of these workers are subject to chronic diseases resulting from poor health care, poverty, and malnutrition. The death toll is appalling. Heinz Stegmann, a German priest working in Katutura, has been outspoken about the terrible conditions of his parishioners, despite the fact that, like all foreign clergymen in Namibia, he has to be careful of what he says, since many who have spoken out here have been harassed or forced to leave the country. He refuses to be silent.
I've been here in Katutura for 8 years now, and you see, if you want to know something about the problems in my parish, when I came to Katutura, I started burying children under that tree. And since that, in the 8 years, the whole graveyard is full, and we have started a new graveyard. So that is really a full graveyard in the moment. And that gives you some idea about the problems we have. We have a high mortality rate of children here, because if you see the conditions, if you see the dust, if you see the dirt, and you know that the parents are working, a lot of young women are unmarried, they can't leave the job when the child is sick, so someone else has to care for the child, and because of the filthy conditions here in the whole township, mainly, the end is the death of the child. A lot of these houses are absolutely overcrowded. You know, if you come into a house with 4 small rooms and you have at night maybe 20, 30 people living in that room or sleeping in that house, that cannot be anything healthy. So it brings a lot of problems to the family life. It brings a lot of problems to the social life of a family.
But Seba is a social worker who concentrates on helping families who don't even have money to clothe and feed their children, or whose debts and poverty are ignored by an uncaring state.
Ja, het het goed gegaan. Aha. En het die enige verbetering aan jou probleme gekry in die week?
Oh, sister, ik heb zo baie problemen. Het is nog niet recht, nie, sister.
Was dit? Aha. Wat is je probleem nou op die
Baie
oomblik?
problemen, sister. Geldproblemen en kostproblemen en de ziekte van kind. Nou, ik is alleenig.
Is alleenig.
Daar is niemand wat die kan voor me helpen.
Wow.
Is niet ik wat maar wat zeker samen die kind is baie zwaar.
Nou, u werk nog mos nie.
Ik weet
Nou,
niet,
hoe
sister.
lewe julle nou weer?
Sister, als ons daar 50 rand, ik betaal moet die huis.
Ja.
Als ik 50 rand af, 15 rand of 25 betaal,
Ja.
dan is al klaar. Dan koop ik niet mijn rok niet, dan koop ik ook niet die kindjes kleren niet. Nee. Dan koop ik maar pikkie millimil. Als dat je pikkie millimil krijgt, dan blijft ons maar net zo. Ik ga lenen bij andere mensen.
Je gaat leen bij andere mensen geld of kost?
Kost,
Ja.
sister.
Aha.
Hoe komt sister, hoe zal ik zo leven? Mensen kan toch niet zo leven?
Nou, is daar enig iets waaraan ik denk wat die kan doen om misschien die problemen te kan oplossen?
Sister, ik wil heel laat toch die mensen moeten op me helpen. Die mensen wat ik kan voor me helpen, ze moeten toch voor me helpen. Ze zien zelf hoe leuk ik kan toch niet weer toe gaan. Nie?
She is very, very frustrated because she feels she can go to work, but she can't because of these problems at her house. And the state don't want to give her, some grant so that she can, take care of these kids of her. This is very critical. And as you have seen, I must tell you that this is not an exceptional case. This is one of the most typical cases in Katutura.
This kid is malnourished, which means is deficient nutrition. It's what we call marasmus. She didn't have a balanced diet, enough proteins and calories, and we are having an increasing problem with these kids. As you can see, there are no muscles, only the skin which is wrinkled, and we are having an increasing problem with these kids. And they are usually kids born by young mothers.
In my work, I see so many children who die quite unnecessarily. And I think it's very difficult to regard this in any kind of dispassionate fashion. You feel as a person that we can save these children, we can treat these children, and we can prevent this enormous infant mortality by putting the money where it's needed. Now, infant mortality in this country is 165 per 1,000. In other words, out of every 1,000 children, 165 black children die before they reach the age of 1 year. Now, this is a high figure. It is high, firstly, by comparison to Western countries where you have an infant mortality of 14 per thousand. It is high even by Namibian standards where, with the whites, we have an infant mortality of 21 per thousand. In other words, in this country at this time, black children are dying at a rate 8 times greater than white children are dying. We're living in the same country, with the same climate, basically the same conditions. And this enormous disparity in infant deaths is something that, to put it mildly, makes one's blood boil. I think it's enough to make an ordinary doctor turn into a political militant or, shall we say, a social radical.
The South African system of apartheid, which has been imposed in my country, means total discrimination in housing, in education, and especially in healthcare. The state of our medical services reflects much of the overall political situation for blacks in Namibia. Here in the north, near the Angolan border, where more than 500,000 people live, there is only one doctor to every 17,000 people, and not a single anesthetist, gynecologist, or any other specialist. The one doctor here is doing the work of 5.
We have on the average 500 outpatients per day. Although we have 246 registered beds, on the average you are having, like today we are having 460 patients, inpatients I mean. Overcrowding is a problem because you don't have enough beds. Some people are lying on the floor, some on the beds outside. People waiting for hours and hours. Like as you can see, some of the people come here 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. They are still waiting to be attended to. They are still waiting for me. We keep here all the types of infectious disease like gastroenteritis, whooping cough or say pertussis, parasitic infections, malaria during the summertime when you have malaria, anthrax, bubonic plague, and also sometimes we have a pulmonary plague. From October, we have had 448 cases of plague, of which 13 have died. This child is having a plague, bubonic plague, as you can see the swelling here in the neck. This is not a common place for plague. Usually it is in the groin or in the femoral areas where we get a big swelling of the lymph node. Or the next second place, common place, is in the axilla. This is possibly the third commonest area in the neck, in the lymph node of the neck. TB is one of our commonest problems, being a social problem. As you know, that the TB spreads by overcrowding, poor nutrition, unhygienic conditions in our houses, being a rural area. And we keep most of the patients in the hospital for at least 4 months because we cannot have them being treated on an outpatient basis, especially the first months. This ward was built for about 58, 60 patients. But at the moment, like today, we are having 101 patients. The problem is mainly of drugs. Sometimes we have a shortage of drugs. Instead of using 4 main drugs we use at the beginning while they are in the hospital, sometimes we have only 2. And you are wondering, what other types of drug to use. As you know, we are living in an operational area, curfew. You may not travel at night, whether you are ill or not. And sometimes people who are injured or get accident during the late in the afternoon or at night, they only come the next day to hospital, and this may be too late to help. We have seen some patients who come to hospital 12 hours after they were injured with the intestines outside.
As in healthcare, so too in education, you see how apartheid permeates every aspect of our lives. This new teachers training college, for example, was built by the government to take 1,200 students. But because of its whites-only policy, just 200 study here. It's our own multi-million-pound white elephant. By contrast, Here in the south, among the shacks of Wachanas, a small, poor community is struggling to run its own school.
Morning, Pastor.
Good morning,
How are you?
Nora. Fine, thank you.
Brought
How are
you
you?
some books.
Yes.
Last,
Yeah,
even
right.
though it's so late.
Yes.
Why don't one or two of you come and help us over here?
Wachanas is one of 3 community schools in Namibia, run by the Education Department of the Namibia Council of Churches. Here, we're trying to help a fiercely independent community break the stranglehold of South African control on our education. Yeah, I managed to bring a number of books this morning from the list that you gave me. But the problem we are faced with right now is that most of the books have to be ordered from South Africa. In government schools in Namibia, children are taught in Afrikaans, the language of white South Africa, in order to keep us culturally dependent on them.
Good morning, class.
But at Wachana School, we teach in English, and parents and teachers have a say in all matters affecting the school.
Studied the impact of genuine government here in Southwest Africa. Now this morning, we are going to be busy with the South African rule.
In Namibia, compulsory education applies only to white children, and 7 times as much money is spent on the education of a white child as on a black child. Only 1 in every 1,000 black children in Namibia completes high school. But in this school, an attempt is being made to equip our children with the skills that will enable them to escape the shacks of Wachanas. Tragically, only a few of our children will manage that escape in Namibia today.
Kabadu ngadu ko ngai hai am kasa ngai nama ko baptisa ngai iskadu ko turo tso ha isa iskia ibe ngam san ob asa huji idu ngadi ko usi tikai se kai ngasi dai durau ka dikmi wa thwa ka do ya kabadu disi.
The resentment of most black Namibians towards the South African regime has been fueled by their poverty and the struggle merely to stay alive. We have been split into ethnic groups and scattered to the most barren, most isolated parts of Namibia, where people's homes are often shacks made from packing cases and corrugated iron. For them, and others in the south of Namibia, there is still the constant fight against the unrelenting sun and a drought which has turned grass to dust and villages into tracts of dry, barren land. In some parts of Namibia, there has not been a decent fall of rain for 10 years, and in all this time, the government has done very little for the people. We have no modern reservoirs and no irrigation schemes. You have seen pictures like these from other third world countries, but you should not be seeing them from Namibia. For potentially, This is a rich country, but our wealth is being drained by South Africa. It has been difficult telling you this story. During the filming, the film crew were arrested and deported. Everyone appearing in this film is taking a gamble, putting themselves at risk.
Before anybody should want to know and ask the question why a Christian minister is a revolutionary, then that person must ask himself, what are the causes? What made that minister a revolutionary?
I am the private school. It's our private school. We love India, our mama tongue. I am the private school. It's our private school.
Each and everybody in the international community knows that the government, and in this case the South African government, who claims to be a Christian government, is oppressing my people, oppressing Christians, and yet call itself a Christian government. So I have no other alternative than to be a revolutionary.
SWAPO, the Southwest Africa People's Organization, has, after many years of peaceful resistance, taken up arms to fight a war of liberation through soldiers like these in its external military wing. Within Namibia, SWAPO is not allowed to hold public meetings and its members are detained, although the organization is not banned. The South Africans claim that SWAPO is a Marxist terrorist organization. Certainly, it is fighting against the South African dictatorship. But like so many freedom movements, this came as a last resort when all efforts to achieve peaceful political change had failed. SWAPO's overriding objective is a united, independent Namibia. South Africa is afraid that a future SWAPO government would be unsympathetic towards South Africa and would introduce communism on their doorstep. Yet the majority of Namibians, including SWAPO members, are Christians and moderate people.
SWAPO wants to show to the people that our country is being exploited. The minerals, the mineral resources are being exploited. And that's why we want to let the people understand that we are somebody, we can take over the control. So that's how we try to mobilize the people.
If we Namibians are ever to run our own country, many more of our children must receive a proper education. These are the first students to complete their secondary education at one of the recently established Council of Churches community schools. No wonder their relatives and friends are celebrating.
The struggle in this country for free Namibia has been going on for over 100 years. When my great-grandfather started to resist German colonial rule over this country, where the Germans, during the course of this resistance, slaughtered tens of thousands of my people. So the struggle has been for a long time, and we are still continuing that very same struggle today. We know that we are not going to be given free of charge. We have to sacrifice even our lives, as we have done already.
My country is in the grip of the most repressive security legislation the South African legal and political machine has been able to devise. We have no freedom of speech. The press is censored, and the heavy hand of South Africa attempts to silence any opposition. These laws give the security forces in my country blanket freedom to carry out their murderous activities, largely immune from investigation. In spite of this, there are a few lawyers and judges brave enough to fight for justice. One law which has forced some members of the legal profession to speak out is AG 9, passed by the South African Overseer of Namibian Affairs.
AG 9 has been brought into being by the Administrator General in this country, who is an appointee of the South African government, and is one of the more ruthless legislations that we have in this country. A policeman, no matter what his rank, how junior he is, can decide to detain someone, whether he's commissioned or non-commissioned, decide to remove him from society, detain him at any place for any offense. The legislation states specifically for an offense. It does not define the defense.
The case of Johannes Kakuva, arrested under AG 9, shook the South African administration both in Pretoria and in Windhoek. Kakuva's family took the authorities to court over his disappearance. It was proved that Kakuva, a black farmer, was brutally beaten by the security police and that he died in their custody.
Security police decided in the Kakuva case that they wanted to detain people and remove certain people from society in Opuva, in Kaoko land, in the northern part of our country. And they decided to detain 25 people. They then blindfolded them, kept them in a very small room. They locked someone else up in a little gas cubicle where they keep gas bottles for days on end. These people were then interrogated by the security police, and it was found that the people that were interrogated, there was about 6 of them, were in fact assaulted by the security police, and Kakuva in fact died as a result of the torture and maltreatment by the police.
As the examining doctor in the Kakuva case, I found 2 aspects which were most dramatic. The first was that even though I had examined the people who had been assaulted 2 to 3 years after the assault, all of them were still suffering psychological effects of the way in which they had been tortured. Secondly, I found that all of them, even after 3 years, still had these very distinct marks in the places where they had been tortured. In particular, each and every one had very severe stripes across their buttocks. Technically, they are known as tram-line scars. Now, to find scars of this nature after so long a time indicated that the initial injuries were extremely severe and extremely deep. In other words, they were not only tortured, they were also maimed for life. The doctors who appeared for the state tried to prove that the marks which I had identified as marks of assault, as scars and bruises, were an example of tribal scarification. Now, I've checked all the anthropological and medical literature, and there's not one single example of any tribe anywhere in the world that could conceivably identify itself by making marks on its backside.
The Kakuva trial is in fact an historical trial in the sense that not even in South Africa has it been proven that someone died in detention as a result of being beaten and being tortured by the security police.
It is the people in the north of Namibia, on and around the Angolan border, who suffer most from the continuing South African occupation. 50% of my people live here in densely populated homelands. To them, brutalities and atrocities committed by the South African security forces are an everyday occurrence. South Africa has nearly 100,000 troops here, regulars and mercenaries. Thousands of Namibians took refuge from the South African troops across the border in Angola. But even there, they were not safe. The South Africans carried the war over the border into Angola, attacking the refugee camps. Here, at Kasinga, they first bombed the camp, then sent in paratroops who massacred 600 people, men, women and children, and wounded over 1,000. This is the carnage they left behind. The South African authorities claimed Kasinga was a military base, but investigations by the United Nations clearly showed it to be a camp for displaced Namibians. Many other brutalities have been committed since the massacre at Kasinga, but so deep are the levels of fear in my country that most people are afraid to speak about them. One white Namibian politician, however, has defied the authorities and detailed the horrors of life for blacks in northern Namibia.
The South African knows what's going on here because they are in full control of Namibia. They have got their so-called security forces up here. They have got 10,000 of men in the country, especially up in the north, Ovamboland and the Kavango area. So they know what's going on. It's their deeds, it's their handling of the situation. It's their people, especially the officers, who know exactly what is going on. One of their groups are the Kufut people. Kufut is a special group from the police. Kufut means literally crowbar. So they break up any opposition. With reason or without reason, it doesn't matter. And these people are very dangerous. Lots of them are brought up just to shoot and kill. They are brought here as a killer commando.
As black death squads under the command of white South African officers, Kufut is suspected by many in Namibia to be responsible for a whole catalogue of crimes committed in the north. The destruction of church property, rape, torture, and murder. A number of Kufut members are already facing charges of such a nature.
I got first-hand information when I still was until 1976. Police reserve men here in the country. So I had the contacts to the police. I got my information there. Afterwards, I got the information from the people. Now, hundreds of people over this period were arrested unlawfully, according to us. They were badly treated. They were intimidated. There were a lot of atrocities while they were in detention. They were beaten up. They came out with broken ribs. They had electric shocks.
Makura kutunganyo po yuwaka huidange mekero abana manga ngi ndi momgeshi bana manga tani karara mo ikwasi momete ama kwanta ni bakusirenge mu neze korundo korundo iko na kereshibiki iponye bakapangurange bapurengashi yobe oterekere bashwapo amamu bashwapo kapani bama shimpimpa yoge wadio amamu kapani bama tene impimpa yange zendeni kemburange mukapure muno bakutwakana omo mukunda ishabo impimpa yoge tubaka kuzirenye mbatiri nontambo makuwa tawa manganye kukupi basedere kono change tawa mangoku tawa sendere kono change makura bana manga ngengesi koro change bana hutura kwa tawa wiki kandwi esinye namena yingi makura amekumomo namuna muliki munatanzika tani bana kumangura
ya tuholokere ngosoma kutunda kimbuyanga niwize kimbo Mr. Nicholas Tia Passion mulamu voko mpepepi makwa ina soda tatu gwananyi yewa tutona watukwata nokutwala kokamba zomusese ikwakatona unene shino kudamuna kutumanga ikehe kutwa kamba za lundu kutwa muno hoki do mukusika mano kuwa pasi ko kuhingira uhundire kwase ngeme mashiruso enota nokwasasi mutingi ile zo kutamanga kutona ta kutona shiri kutona kuyeura na ukatunda konomeho nageje ta kutanda limundo nye hepe ko yakola ngiasi murashi nkenyame nahana kwata uta nahana kulikunda no shiwa posi wakatone ngoso yakorere ngoso
mazwanga mwaka kirim
gahi 3
ndikeni no nyara siganga mwaka kirim
mazwa gahi 3
mwaka kirim umwagazara inchi vamtoni
ay gushwa kutuhepe gatupu mama mukuninga omuntu hana kumuna kushiwapo hana kwata uta kushiwapo bakutoni mahokoko sikora umuntu kuzuza kora ko mutima
murai umwagazara ninke uzuni walimbi namwe chomba kuirugana ndingi
ingano hasata yuka bo bakwaonye banyengi bawo ngana wanye mnaka tu yuko so mambo twalikaira amesika pasinawa.
Many of the military's victims disappear. Others are kept by the army until their wounds heal. Some of the atrocities, however, still come to light. At one hospital on the Angolan border, the film crew avoided the guards and secretly filmed one man who described how he had been horribly mutilated by the security forces. He had tried to prevent soldiers from raping his wife. He was held over a fire and roasted alive.
Kuwema wene kwa wema. Mundiro. Tuya. Tuya. Mundiro.
Kwa bulire bulire.
Ogo.
Munjubo.
Munjibo.
Munjubo wa wemene.
Munjibo ndio wemene.
Ndio orukiri ya munjibo.
Matoropa.
Asuma azuri.
Nice.
Matoropa wakutibikire.
Nice. Nebe akona bya. Nachimene kuleulai baringo wakwata kumahindi wakwata kumutwe na maboko bandikanga ngeti ya chote haka banjumbilamu nageto kondo mokomo ya hembo de bantu bamjindanda chimene mene njinjambe kona kuwa nambe nachindele chabo yoni gundibike bana kwamitela bate ngwatati unyo inakabahona kubakana asiko kuno kunali kakachipembo telaho ni mbiona wale kangonde ocheni muntu.
Doctors saved Mr. Kapitango's life, but they had to amputate what remained of his right arm. 2 soldiers were found guilty of this crime by a Namibian court. They were fined 50 rand each, about 26 pounds. A typical speeding fine in Namibia is 4 times as much. The church in Namibia has been forced out into the countryside by the acute problems of its predominantly black congregation. More than 80% of the Namibian people are Christians, and apart from pastoral care, the church runs hospitals and schools for them. While individuals can be persecuted for speaking out, the Ecumenical Namibian Council of Churches is strong enough to speak with a unified voice.
Lord, remember me when Jesus falling down. Lord, remember me when Jesus falling down. When I'm crossing the river of Jordan, I'm calling my Lord. Dear Lord, remember me, remember me.
The church is the only body in the country where the language of peace is spoken, justice, and human freedom, without any gun pointed on anybody's face. It's the language of peace which people can understand. The church is holding important position, and it's the only church which is the only body in the country which is responding to the needs of the people, giving comfort to the victims of the war situation.
This empty village is a hideous symbol of what is happening to my people. 10 years ago, families were moved into this village in the war zone of northern Namibia. Now, at the armed insistence of the security forces, they've been uprooted again and face an uncertain future in another strange place. This inhuman campaign of removals is happening constantly. My people are treated like cattle, rounded up and moved on to meet the needs of the South African war machine. This then is Namibia today. My people, supposedly the responsibility of the international community, are left to suffer the brutalities of South Africa's illegal occupation. Our children are taught to kill instead of being educated to play a constructive role in society. My people are being forcibly divided into competing ethnic groups instead of being left to develop into a single nation. When independence comes, as it surely will, Namibia will be confronted with such insurmountable problems of reconciliation and reconstruction that it will take decades before development will start. And the very same people and governments who today waste time with resolutions instead of action will be the first to point their finger at us when things go wrong. Yet, the people of Namibia live in the knowledge that Namibia shall be free. One day, we too shall take our rightful place among the liberated and self-governing nations of the free world.